Well, team, I believe some congratulations are in order. After all, my plan worked even more perfectly than expected. Well?
One of these days, Quark. One of these days.
Pal whacking the kisser?
I'm just doing my job.
Oh, something even
Now
worse.
that I know where the Thyrranoids are coming from, I can put a stop to this alien menace once and for all.
By having you do all the
With utter
work.
disregard for my own safety, I've drawn up an ingenious plan for an attack on Thyrranosis. First, I shall humbly step aside, allowing Ratchet to free fall down and
hi.
the mortar launchers.
Am I a
at the
wizard or
landing
what?
site. Once the mortars
But don't
have
you see,
been
Dribs,
silenced,
it's only
the
because he's
dropship
so
will make its
humble.
descent. Next, Ratchet will take the assault vehicle from the dropship, make his way to the 4 plasma cannon turrets, and destroy them. Once the turrets have been knocked out, Ratchet will personally lead the assault on the main enemy base.
You know, you could at least include some other member.
Get to it. Yes, you there in the front.
Yeah, hi. I was just wondering, what are the rest of you gonna be doing while I'm down there getting blasted?
We'll be monitoring the situation closely from here. Actually, we'll be down at the lunch buffet on Deck 5. It's Meatloaf Day.
I can hear
We'll be
you.
rooting for you every step of the way.
Yeah,
Part of
man,
me
we got
really
your back.
imagines that Quark is actually trying to get Ratchet and Clank killed.
It might be
Which-
possible.
I mean, hey, it's a win-win. Well, maybe not a win-win for him because Ratchet and Clank seem to be our legit best hope.
The thing is that Quark has that kind of ego that will still make him believe to be qualified to solve the problem afterward himself.
So, in that case, his mentality is, hey, if they die, then I'll actually step in and do my job.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but if they all die, I'll get in there and do my job by surrendering.
Ratchet, that new armor suit for sale at the vendor is constructed from...
Yeah, this is one of the reasons why the fandom started, getting a bit, annoyed at Quark starting with this game, because it's more of a case of him basically getting away with a lot of bad shit for the sake of, the comedy about it. Anyway, new armor, but we clearly don't have enough bolts for it, so...
My
later.
personal take is that the devs' mindset was, hey, you got to beat the crap out of him, so it evens out.
Okay, if that's the case, it's a pacing kind of problem, because it happens right at the beginning, and afterward, Ratchet basically has to sit down and take all of this humiliation, which is like...
I do agree it's weird, but it's like how it goes. The game even frames it as you finally getting to beat up Quark with Ratchet saying he's had it coming a long time, but then after that, we have to put up with Quark to the nth
Because
degree.
the galactic president wants it.
Alright,
Now-
speaking of the developers, Jova, stop me if you've heard this before. A platformer released in late 2004 had rushed development, and they had to cut a few corners in design, meaning a lot of stuff they wanted to do had to be left on the cutting room floor.
Okay, I know you're
Yes,
referencing
Twinsanity.
No, Enter the Dragonfly. But I don't
No,
know.
I was talking about Crash Twinsanity.
Still,
Yeah.
I don't...
Because this game also had some of those issues.
Okay. The difference here is Enter the Dragonfly was just an outright terrible mess, regardless of what they wanted to put in. Twinsanity is the game people actually liked, so it's more infamous that it turns out a lot of its stuff that was planned didn't make it in because of the rush development.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, Thyrranosis, as the title suggests, is the home planet of the Thyrranoids. So you're basically engaging in some classic movie Starship Trooper kind of invasion, because again, also being in 2004, War on Terror parallel, so we're taking, the fight to the enemy.
I wonder how the economy of this universe works, because you can just find money in boxes.
I mean, it's kind of like with... Again, sometimes you don't question waves, like with Pokemon, for example, The Galactic Rangers thankfully will help you in some steps of the way, not all of them. And you will see later that even Scrunch actually has a role to play, but go on, Jova.
You know, I know that we do scuff at currency being bolts, but how much you want to bet that out in the great multiverse, in a dimension where our alternate selves can view us, they're probably wondering, why do they care so much about paper for currency?
There was a story something similar going like that in an old Mickey Mouse comic that I read that was published in the 80s, Italian made, where Uncle Scrooge basically found his Atlantean counterpart, where his currency was shells, so of course, so nothing of value in the traditional money system.
I guess in a sense, a lot of currency is relative. My theory has always been that bolts are the big thing in the universe because the name of the game is innovation, invention, and technology. And what helps you build stuff the most? Bolts. That's my best guess as to why they double as both something that can be used to build, but are also used as a currency.
If I had to hazard a guess, at least for the development's sake, it was a case where they wanted to replicate the gem effect from Spyro, but wanted to have objects in smaller scale so that they could be collected in more huge quantities, So, and they wanted, yes, with the technical approach, so it should have been something like, say, screws or bolts, so, they went with that. Later games will showcase that bolt is kind of a generic term because the actual objects that you collect for bolt, that count as bolts, include stuff like springs or sometimes even screws, so it's more of a, generic term for utility, small utility objects.
I would say that does kind of lend credence to my theory that the reason bolts are so valued is because, hey, building materials.
Kind of the equivalent of, say, scrap metal, I guess. It's just a more fancy term for that.
You think if anyone would value them the most, it's probably the living robots.
Well, again, like I said, this game will try to, pose a bit of a questioning on the matter. But for the most part, the robots and androids are treated in a more comedic way, even including about their existentialism.
Have you guys heard about this brief run of a Ratchet and Clank manga series?
Well, no, but I can imagine it happened.
Coming in on the dropship now.
Basically, new game, you also get a vehicle section with a dune buggy with Scrunch at the turret. Who lets a monkey actually, handling a gun?
Okay, Spyro, Crash Bandicoot, and Wrath of Cortex, and now this? What was it with platform mascots and dune buggies specifically?
Specifically wanted to have vehicles, to showcase, how cool and diversified the gameplay styles were. Anyway,
I get that, but it was always the Doom Buggy.
This kind of sounds familiar to Resistance 1. You have to have a large area where you have to go inside small buildings, defeat the enemies, and defeat the generator that hampers the force field that halts your progression.
You see, Resistance actually takes place in the past of Ratchet and Clank.
It's more like Insomniac actually homaging its past work. So go on, Dweebs.
That's
alright. The manga was called Ratchet and Clank, Bang Bang Bang, Critical Danger of the Galaxy Legend.
I mean,
bang bang into the room.
It's a bit fancy, but it makes sense, I guess.
It never it's never been released officially outside of Japan.
Much like the Crack manga, I guess.
Yeah, it's like the
well,
one.
fan translations, do your thing, but okay, was it regarded positively or?
I don't know.
It's one of those products where, the internet mostly probably already has done it, considering how old it probably is. I just did not really look into it. Maybe I'll do in between games and report the results.
Typically type in search for any manga online, and if there's not a translation for it, chances are there's a site with a fan-translated version already.
That reminds me, I don't remember, because, something similar to that happened when I tried to look up the the Eternal Sonata manga, actually, which has the Japanese name, Trusty Bell Chopin no Yume.
Eternal
Chopin
Sonata
3.
got a manga.
Don't get excited, Jova. It basically adapts, let's be generous here, the first third of a game. I wonder if it was a case where the author was given very little to no, budget or maximum amount of pages that they could do, because the story basically follows the one of the game relatively closely, except when the party reaches the city where Count Waltz is in, instead of having the misunderstanding where they get arrested, they actually manage to get into the throne room and beat Count Waltz right there and then.
Okay, that's a bit of an abridgment.
And right afterward, we have the whole existentialism about the identity of the dream and podcast through destiny, which...
Okay, they turbocharged.
Yeah, it's to say I wouldn't even call it abridged, because it really just cuts away a lot of the entirety of the 2/3 of the game. So it's more of a case of an alternate universe version. Again, it reminds me a lot of Shiro Amano's work for Kingdom Hearts, except somehow it's even more condensed.
Like, I'm curious, does the Tales of series typically do manga adaptations of the...
They have a couple of
occasionally.
They also have a couple of anime series.
Okay.
Okay, it also depends in terms of structuring. It's not always like, say, Persona the Animation, where it's a bunch of OVAs that, collectively are structured into a couple of, kind of a mini-series format. Sometimes it's a more relatively length kind of series, sometimes it's just like 1 or 2 OVAs. Or, for example, like the one that we have commented by the time of this recording, like the prequel one for Tales of Vesperia.
In regards to Ratchet and Clank getting a manga that may have been Japanese exclusive, my guess, it was the typical bout of trying to, market games like these to
pretty much. Again,
Japan.
the same happened with Crash, as also noted by Kadikaro's video about the merchandising.
Although, kudos to the Japanese side of Crash, they are where the Crash dance came from.
And also fake Crash, although that was an accident. Anyway, showcase a new weapon in the meantime, the Viper. What basically it does is lock on to multiple enemies and then fire a bolt of lightning that manages to, not kill instantly, but deal a decent amount of damage to all of them at the same time. So it's relatively convenient, especially when it gets upgraded. There we go, that's another one of our turrets.
I know that.
Go on.
I know that Crash and Spyro were getting some crossovers, but man, imagine the insanity if, let's say, in a alternate universe where Crash and Spyro are still owned by Naughty Dog and Insomniac instead of, going to basically
they were never
companies.
They were never
No.
They were always owned by Universal, and the devs were subcontracted to that.
That's what I was getting at, though, when I said, let's imagine if they actually still had them instead of, Crash and Spyro having to stay with the people who actually did own them, or for whatever circumstances. How cool would it have been if we got a crossover between Crash, Spyro, Ratchet, Clank, and Jak and Daxter?
Again, despite the similarities in appearance, the gameplay styles still are, considerably different. It's probably one of the reasons why the Fusion Game Boy Advance games, or as we know they're called in America, their inverted color, orange and purple, decided to go with the stupid party minigame format, because they had to basically unify the two franchises into something that felt more cohesive to what the devs and publishers wanted to get out of them.
Which I've always felt is a bad reason. Look, you are of two different gameplay styles, but here's the thing. When fans are asking for a crossover, I think that would imply that the fans kind of have an idea of what they're getting into. And at their core, they're platformers with a bit of slight variation in how you platform, essentially, here and there. Like, I would argue, especially given that pretty much all of them had a bit of a collectible nature at their core, I feel like you could come up with a unifying gameplay style between them, since a lot of what they do involves hopping around, breaking boxes or containers or whatever in order to get collectibles and whatnot. Maybe some shoot, others don't. Technically, Crash and Spyro did shoot at times as well.
Well, it's also the fact that, you know, for just to still focus on... Oh, by the way, I'm about to get another one of those statues about Al this time. What is he doing here? I don't know. But just to keep focusing on Crash and Spyro alone, there's the fact that their concept of platforming is completely, you know, incompatible with each other. Crash is more about simple hopping between, you know, short bursts of obstacles, you know, having to focus on where he lands his feet, you know, if any. While instead Spyro is more focused on exploration and big traversal while using, you know, mobility of the wings, you know, for gliding and the occasional power-up that, you know, lets him fly. So, again,
I feel like
if it's something that even with a crossover, it will have to feel that the two properties are still separated in order to work. And by that point, it may feel like, you know, a Crash section in that kind of way would feel like just a simple sped up version of the Blinks the Mole sections from Hero's Tale. And I know that a lot of people do not like those, so...
Counterpoint, though. Between Crash Twinsanity and Tag Team Racing, Crash was sort of getting into a bit more of the open explorish, like not too open world, but at the very least on par with Spyro. And I would argue, what you could do is either have something like a tag in, tag out mechanic, or have the two constantly with each other, like have Crash ride on Spyro for the gliding or whatnot, have Spyro accompany Crash for some of the more narrow stuff here and there. I would argue that it is very applicable to have done that, essentially.
Alright, one last turret to go with. Also, you may start to notice that despite having the same enemies, some of the same enemies from previous, you know, previous levels, these are already relatively tougher because, you know, in order to scale up the challenge, because even with you know, evolved weapons, which in previous levels were able to like one-shot even on a lower level. In this case, we're not able to do as much damage and have to like 2 shots them, for example. So their resistance is actually scaled depending on the level that you're in, and they will progressively get even more tougher.
I forget if I asked you before, but of the Ratchet and Clank games, like, what would you say is your favorite overall versus which is like your favorite specific bits? Like, you know, story, gameplay, or whatnot.
Okay, favorite story and game. In general, A Crack in Time at the cost of, you know, being an easy answer kind of blends in. I do not like some of the decision about the retcons that were applied, but overall I do like the idea of the scope and tying the origins of the two characters and, you know, leading up to greater things.
Same.
When it comes to just the classic games, like I said, I probably will say this, for the gameplay alone, you know. The first game is solid enough as an origin story, despite, you know, the things that we noticed about it. But again, this one is just more fun to play, simple as that. And Deadlock, conversely, is not. Anyway, first boss fight, real boss of the game, the Thyrranoid Queen. She's
for me, sorry. For me, it's kind of similar. Like, I also think this is the most fun to play of the PS2 era, definitely. Much like Tail, like I definitely have a strong liking for the story of Crack in Time. Although, if you ask me, what's the overall best game, the one that's the most well-rounded, best overall made game, to me it's Ripped Apart, because I feel like first of all, I really like the sidestep move that they added with the part that makes combat much more dynamic in terms of dodging at the same time and stuff like that. Makes dodging a lot are cool and everything. And again, everything about it is just again further refinement of everything we've had since the original game in general. So it's just like. And the story is just so really good. Like for example, I prefer the story of A Crack in Time, but in terms of character writing, I prefer Rift Apart. So it's one of those cases where, but now when it comes,
yeah, it's just a phase transition because now you switch basically after you've defeated enough. For some reason you get this Matrix like 360 shot, which leads us to a first-person perspective of the Queen, and you have to run away from her.
Yeah,
Pedro.
It's one of those cases where the sidestep / dodge move that they added in Rift Apart feels so good to use during combat that going back to previous games, I just miss it. You know what I'm talking about, right? Like it's one of those cases where it's such a great move to have that going back to the older games now, it really I feel like I probably would be just like, oh my god, I wish I had that move here. It just feels so cool to use.
The lava gun, as you can see, works just the same at this in base form. You'll be able to see the upgrade eventually.
Hey, pissed on her ass.
The moveset is fine overall of the Thyrranoid Queen. As you can see, she's still relatively spongy, but it's still fine as a boss overall to handle with the arsenal that you have right now.
She has a few bullet hell maneuvers, but overall, as long as you keep coverage on her,
what the platforming counts for. It's mostly, again, it's similar to Rayman 2. The platforming in combat works like, the enemy shoots a sequence of, bullets and you need to jump at the right moment, basically.
Yeah.
Captain Quark, first you made another miraculous comeback.
I love how the
now you've
reporter was
defeated
with
the
him for
Thyrranoids in a
this.
spectacular
It's the first time we
battle
actually
on their
meet her
own
live,
planet.
actually.
How do you explain your recent success?
Courage, compassion, dashing good look, iron hard abs.
Yeah.
Seriously though,
Even she ain't buying it.
Hero of heroes, you need more than loads of charisma and a brilliant tactical mind. I couldn't have done it without these massive guns.
I like how Ratchet for a moment thought.
Yeah, I
Clank
don't
would
idea why
actually do
Ratchet
it.
doesn't just start blasting him again, but
I'm surprised you didn't just say, no, he's talking bullshit, I did all that.
Well, you see, Tio, the reason is because that would be considered treason, and we might be put to death for that.
Anyway, like I said, the missions of each of the planet where you get eventually the Galactic Rangers helping tends to be without major plot outside of occasional banter from the Galactic Rangers, saying the usual things like, oh, go after the enemy, or I don't want to die, So what I will showcase them will be speed up.
I don't know about you, but this music makes me need some potassium!
Jova, guess what game got released when I was recording this? That should tell you many things.
Yeah, basically. No, like the mechanic of a lot of guns using the dual sense, in the sense that you shoot less bullets if you tilt if you press the right analogs. That's one of the big thing. That's one of the big advantages of them choosing the shooting controls to the triggers, because it allows you to control just how much ammo you want to use at all times, which again creates an extra element of like, I just want to use a couple bullets for this gun, not like the full thing that you would have. So I like that too, where I'm constantly making decisions of how much ammo to use in the moment.
Anyway, to answer your question, Dweebs, the name of this track is Attack of the Killer Queen.
And what game is it from?
Deltarune Chapter 2.
Ah.
Again, when it comes to the Thyrranoids missions, as you can see, they're mostly focused about occasionally also you getting an airship, a dropship, and defeating the anti-air turrets, for example, are occupying the base. Again, the controls also on the ship are not too bad. For being the first major game where they put vehicles in it of a franchise, they actually did a decent enough job, because a lot of the risk with that had to be, you know, mostly about you know, them being clunky, going way too long, or your vehicle being too fragile. So at the very least, I argue they got those right.
As for which game had my favorite ship design, that's a little tricky.
There's a lot to talk about for the ship, particularly for the future saga, but we have to wait really until then, because that's one of the decisions that I felt I had no idea what they were going for on the long run, because it feels like they were establishing something clearly with one game, but then they promptly decided to just forget about it with the next. Again, you will be able to get the context eventually.
To keep it more in line, if I were to discuss how I feel about the future series in general, it feels a bit like what a successor company would have made the Ratchet and Clank series, except no, this is still Insomniac, so there still is at least a good enough sense of continuity for the most part, mind you.
It was the biggest Thyrranoid you've
At the
ever
very
seen.
least, there is
Big as a
someone
Star
who's
Cruiser
actually
and
willing
packing
to,
twice
you
as
know,
much firepower.
give some
There
feedback
was
to
no
Ratchet.
escape. He was coming right at me. Closer, closer. Oh, what am I gonna do, right? Closer, even closer.
Wasn't it technically a
click,
she since it's the
jam.
queen?
No
I
way.
think he's referring to
What
just a
happened
generic
next?
fight. Oh.
Yes, go on. We're all riveted.
So,
Oh no,
this
but
is
it's not
the
till
mighty
later.
Fuel force I've heard so much about. Pathetic! I could obliterate the lot of you, and they wouldn't even mention it in Supervillain Weekly.
True, sir, but you'll have done the fashion world an enormous service.
And as for you, Agent Clank, I have far grander
You do know
plans
that's
for
a TV
you.
show, right?
Yeah, that's the thing, Glims. Nobody seems to get the memo.
Yeah.
Before I kill you, Agent
Yeah.
Clank.
Aye, sir. What a treat.
Thank you, Lawrence. What can we do without him?
Come in!
Yellow.
Someone just transmitted a hologram onto the ship. I need to know where the signal came from.
Let's see. Backtracing the signal. Six-path alpha key encryption.
It came from some guy in his
I
basement.
got it. It came from a facility on planet Dax.
Or
Accessing
that.
their computer files.
Planet Dax?
Aha! I found something suspicious. Patching it through now.
Tonight, we take a journey inside the enigmatic mind of our galaxy's foremost evil genius, Dr. Nefarious. We'll take a
Thanks,
tour
Marvin
of
the
this secret
Martian.
facility on planet Dax, home to some of the galaxy's most insidious superweapons, including the dreaded Rainbow Afrolyzer. Dr. Nefarious, we've all enjoyed your past work, but how do you respond to critics who say your latest galactic schemes are just more of the same?
I will annihilate them!
Lawrence, tell us a bit about this top-secret superweapon being constructed on planet Dax.
Well, super is such a strong word. For that matter, weapon may be a tad overdoing it. We do, however, have a lovely view of the ocean
Oh,
itself.
that's nice.
Is Dr. Nefarious poised on the brink of galactic domination, or is this super weapon just the latest in a series of maniacal pipe dreams? Stay tuned for more from Supervillain Weekly.
How nice.
Whatever Nefarious is doing on Dax, it can't be good.
We'll check it out.
You're welcome.
Nobody thanked Hal, seriously, why? Anyway, tuning for the next part, where, as mentioned, we go on Dax to check the supposed super weapon program. See ya.
See ya.
See ya.
I